Screenagers. Welcome back into another episode of the Canon, the only movie podcast providing you with a watch list of the most essential movies ever made. We've got another essential movie for you today. You might be wondering, why is Grosse Pointe Blank in the Canon? Why is this an essential movie? Don't worry, we're going to get into it. Joining me today, we have two of my favorite contributors to Screenage Wasteland, who are going to help explain to us why Grosse Pointe Blank deserves its place in the canon. Welcoming back to the show, Ramona and Bob. Thank you guys so much for joining. I feel like this is the perfect crew to talk about this movie. I think this is both of your guys' first appearances on or in season 2. So welcome back to the show. How are we doing?
Good. Glad to be back.
Yes, very exciting. I was very excited for season 2.
Season 1 was a hit.
I've been enjoying it so far. So.
Yeah.
We had some great conversations with both of you on, various different episodes in season 1. I don't think there were any episodes that featured all three of us. So this is our first go around with this particular iteration of Saw contributors. So that'll be fun. But again, like I said, I think this is totally the right movie to bring both of you in to talk about. So before we get into the movie of the week, listeners, you know that we like to do a little bit of banter before we get into movie talk. And the obvious question for banter around this movie is the high school reunion, the 10-year high school reunion to be exact. So Ramona, Bob, I have to ask the question. And Ramona, we'll kick it to you first. Did you guys attend your 10-year high school reunion? And if so, how was that experience?
I did not attend my 10-year reunion. I did attend my 5-year reunion, which I don't know why they have 5-year reunions. Like, there's not enough time to live life between high school graduation and then 5 years later. Just seems kind of pointless. And I think what happened with my 10-year is when it was happening, I was married at that point. And I guess I was kind of like thinking to myself, the people that I still want to see and talk to from high school, I see and talk to already. So I just had no real desire to go. Plus, we had tickets to see Daughtry that night. So we went to a concert. So we went to a concert of all bands. We went to see Daughtry. So I didn't go. I did hear that it was fun. It was at a bar, close to where I live. And it's just, I don't know. I didn't go to I say this on all the other episodes I've been on, but this is going to age me. I didn't go to my 20-year either. So I'm kind of over high school and seeing the same people that I went to high school with. Plus with social media, you kind of already see a lot of what they're doing and, what their lives are like now if you're friends with them on social media. So I don't know. I just didn't see the point of doing it. I kind of have lived my life apart from high school, and high school is such a, for a lot of people, not a great time. So why do I want to go back to it? So no, I did not go to my reunions.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an issue of travel or anything. Like you still live.
No. Yeah, I still live.
High school yeah.
Yeah. Actually my twin daughters, their kindergarten graduation was held at my old high school. And it was bizarre walking through there to go to the auditorium again. So yeah, I'm pretty much done. I'm done with it.
And your husband didn't go to high school with you?
No, he went to a different high school, and we did go to his 10-year reunion. I went with him to his. It was a lot of fun.
How was that? Meeting his high school friends.
Well, and a lot of the ones that showed up were ones that he still hangs out with. So it wasn't like having to meet a lot of new people. There were some people there that it was held at some woman's house who he went to school with. She has this huge house now, like beautiful house. So she hosted it. I think his high school class, his graduating class was like less than 100 people. So it wasn't like mine where I graduated with 500 people. So just the atmosphere of it felt a little bit more casual and less like intimidating, I guess. So it was a good time.
Yeah. I mean, 500 people, that's intense.
Yes.
That's a lot of people to
yeah.
to
And
catch up with.
I remember maybe like 25 of them. And when someone's like, oh, do you remember so-and-so from high school? I'm like, no, I don't remember that person at all.
Person
So
doesn't exist.
yes.
That's great. Bob, what about you? Did you attend your 10-year high school reunion?
I did not attend my 10-year high school reunion either. I had moved quite far away, was part of it, but also similar to Ramona's, all the people I wanted to keep in contact with, I pretty much did.
Mm-hmm.
And the other people, especially, and I hate to say this in public, but the people that were involved in organizing it were all people that I didn't really hang out with or care to hang out with to begin with. So that kind of put I'm going to show up and it's going to be full of people that I didn't really get along with. And you know what? I think I'll go to a class reunion when I've grown famous and successful. And so that still hasn't happened either. So I haven't done. Yeah.
You got to give it some time.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
We're getting there. Yeah.
So I'm afraid, no.
Fun fact, when I did go to my husband's reunion, we did get to hang out with, her actress, Artemis Pebdani. Do you know her? She's in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Yeah, she actually was the +1 of my husband's best friend who lives in Los Angeles. He came in from Los Angeles and brought her with him. So that was a very interesting evening, I have to say.
That's amazing.
She was very nice. I liked her a lot. Yeah.
Nice.
She seems like a great hang.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
she was.
I guess the whole deal with high school reunions is that everyone is who is going is just going to show how much they've done and how successful they are post high school career. And
right.
I feel like that whole dynamic is kind of weird. It would be nice to just like for high school reunions to, instead of showing off how successful you are, to just show how much everyone has grown as a person. And, like the people who you used to think were shitheads in high school are now really nice people and have nice families. And, and if that were the whole, idea behind why we do high school reunions and like why people go to high school reunions, I feel like they would be a lot more fun than just, that one weird kid from history class, is now telling you about how he owns 8 car dealerships in the greater St. Paul area or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah. So you guys didn't want to go back to your high schools and brag about, everything going on in your lives, about the Screen Age Wasteland, the Canon, and all that stuff. Plenty to brag about.
That. I already brag about that on my Facebook, so they all know. So
yeah, that's right.
I am too busy to go and do it face to face. I just don't have the time.
That's fair.
Or the desire.
Yeah.
Very fair. I guess we're 3 for 3. I did not go to my 10-year high school reunion. I don't know if I had a 10-year high school reunion, so I'm also going to age myself right now, but perhaps in the opposite direction. My 10-year high school reunion was during COVID, and there were people planning it, and the people planning it were definitely the folks who were like needed to show off how far they've come since high school.
Right.
It was like that crew who was planning it. But I was like interested in going. I wanted to catch up with people. It is nice with social media that you get to still sort of keep in contact with people who you otherwise wouldn't keep in contact with. So that aspect of high school reunions, I feel like is kind of gone, where you show up to a room or like your old high school gymnasium and someone who you were like friendly with, who you had some classes with, but not someone who you totally kept in touch with. You get to see them, you get to catch up with them for a little bit. Like that seems cool. But that is totally lost with social media nowadays. But yeah, I would have been interested to go and check it out and see how people are doing and all that good stuff. And also, like, I was kind of interested in seeing who was showing up to to show off. I was
Right.
like really interested to see which characters were like, hey, remember how much high school sucked for me? Well, now I am killing it. Like now I'm the man. Now I'm the bee's knees. I was kind of excited to see that. And just like try to personally gauge like how much bullshitting they were doing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought that would have been a fun game.
Yeah. And because a lot of them are exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I think it's harder to get away with that now, again, with social media.
Mhm.
But I think some people, especially, and actually on social media, honestly, most of the time, everyone's lives seem so perfect, except like the drama queens who want that attention and everything always goes wrong for them. But,
Mhm.
you see the perfect pictures and the family and all this stuff, and then you see them in real life and you're like, oh, and social media is a disguise.
Yeah.
Everything is great.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like I would wish like badly on anybody I went to high school with, because I don't, but
No.
it's just, I think there's definitely a little bit of a fib when it comes to social media as opposed to, what's going on in real life. So I can see
Yeah.
where it'd be interesting to see them face to face again and kind of like gauge how they're actually doing versus what you see online.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
the family newsletter of,
Right.
of social media, Facebook in particular. Yeah.
Right.
So none of us have 10-year high school
No,
reunion
sadly.
experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
No, that's why I have to watch this movie so I can live
yeah.
seriously through Mini Driver.
Seriously.
So yeah, what if we missed out on learning that someone who we went to high school with turned out to be a contract killer? A professional hitman.
Yeah.
Now we'll never know
And
because
now
we
I'm
didn't
not.
attend.
Yeah, I don't, because they're not putting that on social media. So it sucks.
Yeah. Hashtag hitman.
Hashtag
Right.
assassin.
Yep. Nope. There definitely been, like, oh, I wonder what happened to so and so. They were a real jerk in high school. Oh, they're dead. Oh,
Oh no.
oh no. How do I feel about that? Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, not to like depress everybody, but at my 5-year, reunion, they did like an in memoriam of kids who graduated with me who had passed already.
At the
And I felt-
5-year.
Yes, and
Oh
I
my
felt
God.
like they had like a little slideshow, and I was watching this. I'm like, I feel like a terrible person because I didn't recognize one person. I was
Oh,
like,
no.
who is? I was asking my friend Stephanie came with me. I was like, who is that? She's like, I don't remember that. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go back through my yearbooks and look. But it was really depressing stuff. So you never know. It's terrible.
Yeah.
That's really
and,
sad.
I come from it was a relatively small town when I was growing up in it. It was a mill town. And I had 123 kids in my graduating class. I think there were 500 people in the whole
Wow.
school. And now my nephew is going to school actually the next town over, but it had a similar population base. But there are 23 kids in his class.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh,
mill
wow.
closed. People left. It's like a ghost town up there.
Oh
Sometimes.
no.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good Lord.
That's crazy.
But at least he'll know everybody in his class, right?
You know what?
Yeah.
And it'll be a really fast ceremony. So
Yeah.
that's even better because ours were so long because of all the kids.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, I mean,
So-
that'll be maybe a half hour.
Ramona, you said graduating class of around 500.
Yep.
775.
Really? Jeez.
Yeah. Which
How?
was small for our school.
Oh my gosh.
M-
How long was
most-
your, did you cut up your graduation ceremony or did it all go at once? Like, did you all?
No, they read everyone's name. We didn't go
Wow.
up.
Holy
Maybe
crap.
we did go up, but they did read everyone's name. And I was sitting with some buddies, and 30% of the names read, we would look at each other and say, I had no idea that person existed. And I'm sure when my name
Yes.
was read, half of the school was like, I have no idea who that guy is.
Who's this guy? Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's kind of sad in a way that you went to school probably all 4 years, maybe even longer, because there were kids in my graduating class that I went to school with since kindergarten
Mhm.
that you didn't ever talk to, never saw them, never had a class,
Yeah.
don't recognize their names. I mean, that's probably why I didn't recognize anybody who had passed since then,
Yeah.
because there were so many of us. And they had additionally, they opened a third high school in my area now instead of just the two.
Mhm.
So their graduating classes are probably less than they were back in my day, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of people.
A lot of people. 200 to 300 seems like a good number.
Yeah.
I was scared about going to the reunion, or the idea of going to the reunion, and people coming up to me and saying like, "Hey, we had XYZ class together, for 4 years or whatever."
Oh, yeah,
and me being like, "I have
yeah.
no idea who you are. I've never seen you before in my
I
life."
sat behind you for 4 years. Nope. Doesn't
Nope.
ring a bell.
Yeah. Or on the opposite end of that, me going up to someone and saying, "Hey, it's so good to see you. How have you been? We had all these classes together. Remember, Miss So and So, she was so silly." And they're like, "I've never seen you before in my life."
Is it worse for them to say, "I have no idea who you are," or for them to obviously pretend like they do?
Oh,
you know what I
that's
mean?
interesting. Yeah.
I would
I
rather
think-
them just say, "I don't remember you," because then they're
I
just
would
bullshitting.
I would rather someone not remember me than me
Yeah.
forget someone else. Like for someone to come
Yes,
up to me
absolutely.
and say that they knew me from classes and stuff, and I didn't know who they were. That would be, I think, would be way more embarrassing.
Yeah.
But yeah, high school reunions, they are wild.
Well,
They
they're
can
definitely not
get-
as fun as Grosse Point Blank's reunion, but
Yeah.
No.
that we know of. I mean, we don't know.
That we know
but
of. We
I know
have no
of.
firsthand experience here.
Correct.
But we do have Grosse Point Blank. Absolutely amazing movie from 1997, starring the one and only John Cusack, who is absolutely delightful. I think getting into this movie in particular, I would like to start the conversation with getting a sense of your guys' relationship and history with this movie. So all those good questions. First time you saw it, what was the situation? How many times have you seen it since? Did you fall in love with it immediately, or did it take some rewatches? Let's walk through all of that stuff just to get started. And Bob, why don't you start us off on this question?
Sure. Well, both my wife and I are longtime John Cusack fans. We'd watched all of his teen comedies growing up. Personally, Better Off Dead's one of my favorites of his early films. Hers is Say Anything, of course. So we were already primed when the movie came out. So we saw it opening night, if I remember correctly, and then we fell in love immediately. Ran out and bought the soundtrack like the next day. And yeah, and I have a DVD of it that's so old. When I try to play it on my TV, it's like a tiny little box in the center of black bars on all the sides. So I gotta find there is a Blu-ray out there somewhere, but I haven't been able to locate a copy yet. But so yeah, we were immediate fans, and I've probably watched it, I would say 20, 25 times at this point, because it's one of those movies that we're like, oh, Grosse Point Blank is on. Let's just sit down and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that. So you've been a fan since day one.
yeah, absolutely.
This movie was essentially made for you.
Yeah, it felt like it, because now I'm going to age myself here. I was coming up on my 10-year class reunion when it came out.
Nice.
So it was very much, a lot of those anxieties were definitely spinning in my head at that point. So having it reflected like that would be awesome, to show up and just pretend to be a serial killer, or not a serial killer, but
completely different movie.
It's a completely different
Bob, what
movie.
are you trying to tell us?
I gotta go, you guys. I'm not feeling well.
Where'd Bob go?
Freudian slips.
I mean, if you think about it, technically, a serial killer is somebody who has killed more than two people. So you could say that he was a serial killer.
I thought you were going to direct this back at me for some reason.
Right. How many people have you killed, Bob?
None on purpose.
I guess when we say serial killer, we think someone who's not getting paid for it.
Right.
Correct. Yes.
It's crazy how that works, right? That's capitalism at its best.
Yep.
If you're not getting paid for it, you're a weirdo serial killer, and we throw you away in jail for years. If someone's paying you for it, you're a hitman, and you get to wear nice suits.
Mm-hmm. You have more respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
So Bob is confirmed neither a hitman nor a serial killer,
Correct.
which is good to know, but is a big fan of Grosse Point Blank, which is also great to know. Ramona, what about you? What was your first experience with this movie? Has it always been a favorite of yours or not so much? Walk me through that.
No, actually, when this movie came out, I was 16. So I didn't really, I don't know. I wasn't really a movie person at that point yet. I mean, I loved movies,
Mhm.
but I wasn't like, once I started working at the movie theater a year later, I was movies. But I don't really even remember when this movie came out. I know it was 97. I didn't give much thought to it, but I did love John Cusack. So when I started dating my husband, he loves this movie. And he swears that we watched it together, like on a date. I don't remember
Mhm.
doing that. So,
Uh-oh. That was his other girlfriend.
yeah, right. I'd be like, who did you watch this with? So, no, but 2021, I think it was still COVID-y, I guess, not as bad as
Mhm.
2020, but I was still doing, I was a couple years in doing Romcom reviews, and he was like, did you review Grosse Point Blank yet? And I was like, well, I haven't seen it yet. And he was like, what? So we sat down and we watched it on a weekend, and I loved it. Like, I love John Cusack. There's just something about him that's just so, like, I don't know, I'm relatable, I guess, very
Mhm.
approachable person.
Yeah.
So, and I had a tiny crush on Minnie Driver back in the day. So I was really excited to see Minnie Driver too.
Who
And
didn't?
it was just something about it felt like this was the kind of movie I could, like Bob said, I could watch anytime. If it was on TV, I'd be like, oh, cool, sit there and watch it. There's just
Mhm.
something about it that's very rewatchable. It's a dark comedy, but it's not too dark, I guess you could say. It's not like off-putting in a way that some black comedies can be. So
Yeah.
we watched it 2 years ago and I loved it. And I think, I gave it like 4.5 stars on my blog or whatever, but it's definitely one of my favorite John Cusack movies. And Bob, I did watch Better Off Dead. It's not my favorite.
No, I think it's a product of its time, but
It is. My husband loves almost all of John Cusack movies, like hardcore. So we sat down and watched that. And we're like, this movie's so weird. Like, what is happening in this movie? But that's a different podcast episode.
yeah. No,
But no, I
absolutely.
don't know. There's just something about it. The cast of Grosse Point Blank, Jeremy Piven, Dan Aykroyd. There's just something that just worked. Everything about this movie is great. The soundtrack, the direction, the performances,
Mhm.
everything. So it's definitely up there in my, I think, top 5 John Cusack movies ever. So I love it.
That's great. Speaking of John Cusack, he's obviously the star and the driving force behind what makes this movie so great. So I personally I've never been a big John Cusack guy. I think I was just born into the wrong generation for that. So I feel like that's also going to make this conversation really interesting throughout the course of this episode, is just like, while I can totally appreciate this movie, I think because of my age, I can't appreciate it the same way that you guys do. Like, I think it connects to people in your guys' generation more than it does someone in mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's an indelicate thing to say, but
Oh,
No,
I
it's
mean, I think
true.
that's a fair, right, a fair assessment. And we can totally cut this if it's inappropriate, but are both of you guys, would you consider yourselves Generation X or millennial?
I don't.
well, go ahead.
I think I'm in that weird in between. I mean, I don't care saying it. I was born in 1980. So I
Mhm.
feel like I'm in that weird in between.
Oh, that's like tail end
Yeah,
X,
like
I
no one.
think.
Yeah, no one can ever figure out what my like generation is. I always hear
Yeah.
different things about it. So I'm kind of like, at the very tail end. I was born in 80.
You're an
I'm an
in-betweener.
in-betweener because I remember a lot of like late 80s stuff, but like
Mhm.
my personality is like the 90s. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
90s, 90s movies, all the 90s stuff. am into more than anything else. But I also remember a bit of the 80s. So it's just, I don't
Mhm.
know. I can never, I am what people call me, I guess. I never have, we don't have like a boomer, or millennial
Yeah.
or whatever they call them. So it's very strange. I'm kind of an in-betweener, like you said.
Yeah, and I'm very solidly Generation X. It's
Nice.
not a big deal. Honestly, thanks for even mentioning the generation, because usually we get lost in the listing of generations. So
Oh,
Mhm.
everyone
yeah,
always
the
forgets about
80s were
Generation
my.
X.
What's that?
Everyone always forgets about X.
Yeah,
They just go
Yeah.
straight
I don't
from
know.
boomer to millennial.
Mhm.
Yep. And whenever, and it's not actually happened to me personally, but I've heard people refer to other Generation X people as boomers. And I'm
Ugh,
always
don't do
like,
that.
no, we hated them just as much as you guys did. Come on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, this movie feels so geared towards anxieties that are really specific to Generation X. I
Mhm.
think in a lot of ways that John Hughes movies were, and some of those other teen comedies and teen movies were in the 80s, the same way that Nirvana was in the early 90s, like really tapping into the same sort of anxieties and sensibilities of Generation X, the same way that Fight Club was tapping into a lot of the same things for, like, older, not older, but like once Generation X got a little bit older, still, like, these are all like movies that make up that, and pieces of text that make up that generation. And as someone who had never seen Grosse Point Blank, I thought it was really cool to watch it and get a better sense of, like, oh, like, these are the kinds of questions and themes that folks within that generation, like, have been dealing with. And, I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now, but, like, this to me felt like the epilogue to those Hughes era movies of the 80s. This feels like it makes sense that it's the 10-year reunion of high school, and it's like, okay, we are finally putting a cap on, like, that era of film and of this genre. I don't know if you guys felt that at all, or have anything else on that particular point.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. That this is kind of the looking back on the kind of sort of almost shiny happy idea of the 80s, where it was all bright lights and bright colors and big hair and yeah, and this was like, oh, there were a lot of dark things underneath all of those
Mhm.
particularly bright things, and commenting on that. And yeah, I like the way you say it's about anxiety, because it's, even having the Alan Arkin's character of the psychiatrist, and the
Yeah.
psychiatrist not really being any help. Part of that's because he's terrified, but
well.
yeah, he's fantastic in that.
Yeah.
But they're kind of putting paid to a lot of the things that were big in the 80s and felt really hollow by 1997. So.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything you just said. The movie does give off a very John Hughes-ish kind of feel to it, except like a darker John Hughes, which I've seen a lot of John Hughes's movies, and I love most of them. But this one, I agree. It's definitely, I mean, it's a 10-year reunion, assuming this takes place in 97, I guess. I don't remember if they dated it. I don't think they did, but
1996, I think.
1996, and what, they graduated in 86. So you definitely
Mhm.
have those. I mean, and anxiety is such a theme in so many movies now anyway, because who doesn't in this world have anxiety now? It's just more prevalent.
Mhm.
I think it's less hidden than it was back in the 80s and 90s. So
Oh,
I love,
yeah.
and I like this movie for that reason, because I mean, who using the hitman, he's a professional hitman, but he's got his own issues too. So it's definitely something that you can watch it. And I guess I don't hate saying, but in my generation, you can watch this and be like, oh yes, I do remember that. We never had a hitman at my high school. Or maybe my reunion, I wouldn't know because I didn't go, but it's very relatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the music, the
music's
the
great.
style of conversation, the style, all of that stuff. It totally it really is tapping into like a specific generation, which is cool. Like I think it's awesome when movies are speaking directly to a specific demographic and like reflecting their thoughts on the big screen, which is totally what this movie is doing.
Yes.
I think I was trying to ask this question before, and then I got sidetracked by some sort of rambling that I decided to do. John Cusack. I've sort of seen some things where this is listed as being in an unofficial or like spiritual trilogy with Say Anything and High Fidelity. Do you, as John Cusack fans, have anything on that, or like where this movie fits into his overall career as an actor, as a leading man, a figure in Hollywood?
I would say it definitely. It's been a while since I've seen High Fidelity. I think I've only seen that movie once. I remember enjoying it, but I haven't seen it since. I will rewatch it eventually, but I would agree that it's definitely a companion piece to Say Anything in terms of his career. Just because I felt that there were some similarities between his character in Grosse Pointe Blank and Lloyd Dobler, which is very odd because Lloyd Dobler, as far as I know, didn't have any murderous tendencies, but but I see a lot of the similarities between the two. So I would say that that's probably accurate. Bob, I'm sure you've seen High Fidelity many times, so you could probably answer on that end, but I would say yes.
Yeah, it's weird because I actually read something about that this week, and I'd never thought of those three movies. Definitely, like Ramona said, Say Anything and Grosse Pointe Blank definitely are almost reflections of each other in a lot of ways. And High Fidelity it's one of the other few movies that Cusack both produced and wrote. So it's definitely got more of him in it. And in that kind of journey of going from a character that's essentially a good person to a character that's essentially a bad person who wants to be good, following finally with a person that just wants to appear good, but has kind of burned everything that would make you a good person on the altar of being cool.
Mm-hmm.
I can see it in that way, but I think High Fidelity doesn't have that same, it's not reflecting on the same issues to me anyway, as those first two films. So to me, it feels separate. Like it's commenting on a different aspect of humanity.
So then would we put Hot Tub Time Machine as the third movie in the trilogy as opposed to High Fidelity?
I love that movie. I do. It's so
That's
funny.
a fun movie.
It is fun. I don't care. I mean, the title's ridiculous, but I love it.
Yep.
I adore that
Absolutely.
movie.
It is so good.
That is a great movie. I mean, the unofficial sequel to Grosse Pointe Blank is War Inc.
Yes.
So that's got Cusack and Joan Cusack and Dan Aykroyd in it, and he's a hitman in it, and it's kind of follows up. It's nowhere near as good, unfortunately, but that to me is more of the bookend. If you're going to go with a John Cusack movie, it's unfortunately one of those movies, and I've described it this way before. It's the kind of comedy that is essentially the guy sitting next to you in a movie elbowing you, going, "Hey, that's funny, right? Haha, that's funny."
Yeah.
It's a little too broad for me, but
yeah.
I have heard of that movie. I know I've never seen it, but I don't know. I guess I just never had the desire to, as much as I do.
If you want to have Dan Aykroyd making puns on a toilet, it's the movie for you.
I feel like I've already seen that somewhere.
That does sound great, but we can do better.
Yes.
We can certainly do better.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I mean, Grosse Pointe Blank, him doing better. So where or how would you guys sort of describe this movie as fitting into Cusack's career as a whole, or even, I guess we did talk enough about how this sort of fits into the 80s teen rom-com genre and how it sort of fits into all of that. But in terms of Cusack's career specifically, do you guys have anything more on where this movie like fits in and what it sort of represents for him in his career?
He did this movie, and it was the first movie that he had a writing and a producing credit on. And he came to it after, like, he'd done a bunch of teen comedies.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of moved into doing darker sort of, I'm trying to expand my career sort of films like Grifters and 8 Men Out and City Hall. And to me, this was a very, it looked like to me like he had like, okay, so I did all of these things. Then I did a bunch of movies that were like me pushing against that sort of character, not wanting to be related to those characters anymore. And then Grosse Point Blank felt like, okay, I've got enough distance from that maybe I can actually make a movie that kind of combines those two elements of my personality, this need for more snarky, darker characters, but also play with my original type of character, so that it felt like a growing up sort of moment to me, where he could kind of be aware of the positive aspects of both sides of his career to that point.
Yeah.
Yes. Very well put. I would say the same thing, to be honest with you. I like that he was able to pay homage to those characters that he played in the past in the 80s, but he kind of reinvented himself with this particular role. That's why I always thought it was like very similar to Lloyd Dobler, only with, if Lloyd Dobler hadn't gone or had not gone to the army, or I'm mixing myself up. If he had gone to the army and become a hitman instead of not going to the army and going, living his life with the girl of his dreams. But I also like that this wasn't exactly like his return to that character, because even after this movie came out, he did so many different kind of movies. Like, he took on very different roles. Yeah. And that's what I really appreciate about watching John Cusack in almost anything, is he still has a lot of that manic energy about him, but he also didn't go on to play Lloyd Dobler for the rest of his career, or Martin Blank for the rest of his career. Like, he never seemed very pigeonholed into one particular kind of role anymore, which I really appreciate about his career. And to be honest, he has a lot of bad movies on his filmography. I mean, he does.
You're not wrong.
But the good movies he was in were so good that I don't even care about all the stinkers on his filmography. Like, I don't care about those, because he's so good in these really amazing movies. And honestly, sometimes even the bad movies, he's the best part of that movie. So I really appreciated him in this film, watching it, especially because I watched it so recently, 2 years ago, of how it reminded me so much of the John Cusack that I saw in those 80s movies. But it was like he had grown up, but he was still, I don't know, he still had that same playful, like, everyman energy about him. That's why I love this movie, and I love him in it.
He's great in it. He's not someone who I've like connected with totally as an actor, but I feel like I've appreciated his career from afar. And Ramon is sort of similar to what you were saying, where he does have some stinkers, but the good movies that he's in are like monumentally good. I don't think Say Anything is in the canon, but everyone knows the moment from Say Anything. I've never seen it, but I know the moment, like, yes. It exists. It's one of those movie moments that exists, that will be timeless. It's never going to die, so even though, he might not be on the level of like a Daniel Day-Lewis or, or Marlon Brando or whatever, but like he's part of some really spectacular moments in movie history. So I think it's cool. And I think it's really cool what he's doing in this movie that is very, very aware of itself. And it's cool that he is like actively taking part in that. So he's great in this movie, but also the supporting cast in this movie is freaking wild.
Yeah.
So many great names. We've already named a bunch of them. But let's just run through the list a little bit, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on all of these folks. But you've got the always delightful and charming Minnie Driver.
Yes.
You've got Dan Aykroyd as a hysterical hitman named Grosse who wants to start a hitman union, which is absolutely hysterical. And there's a lot there in terms of like post 80s anxieties and the idea of starting a union that we don't need to get into, but all just amazing. You've got Hank Azaria, you've got Alan Arkin as the therapist, you've got Joan Cusack, and I didn't know until this movie, but there is a third Cusack sibling, and when she pops up on screen, you're like, oh, she looks exactly like her other two siblings. That's amazing.
She's actually been in quite a few of his movies. She's just a very lesser known name, and Cusack. She's not as well known as Joan, but when she pops up, you know she's a Cusack.
Yeah. They seem like a delightful family. Like, I would love to hang out with them. It seems like the three of them, I'm sure they just love each other so much and have the best time together as siblings. But her popping up really just put a smile on my face. But yeah, what did you guys?
I'm sorry, but there's a fourth Cusack in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Their brother Bill plays a
What?
waiter. Yes. He doesn't have, I don't think he even has a speaking role. I don't know, but I know he was a waiter, and I only know this because my husband pointed it out to me. But there was, so 4 Cusack siblings were in this movie. Yeah. I don't know how many of them there are, but
yeah. Are they like the Wayans and or the Skarsgårds, and there's just a bazillion of them? That's so awesome.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the whole cast and in general? Just sort of general thoughts on all of them, or if there's anyone in particular that you want to point out. And Ramona, why don't you give us your thoughts on this one first?
I love the cast. I adore Joan Cusack. I love her, and she's like kind of like her brother, where any movie I see her in, she is a bonus to me. Even if she's like a main character, she's a bonus. She's so good. I love it when she and John are in movies together, and I think they were in quite a few together. I know she played his sister in Say Anything, but she is one of those people. I think, didn't she get an Oscar nomination for In and Out? I think she did. But she's just one of those people that when she pops up on the screen, I'm like, please give me more Joan Cusack. So every time he was calling his assistant, whenever he was calling her for anything, I was like, please, I just want more of this. And I love Alan Arkin in this role just because he's so dry. He's got that dry humor about him.
So funny in this, yeah.
And they played a little homage to this, and I don't know if either of you have seen America's Sweethearts, but he plays John Cusack's kind of new agey therapist in that movie, and he's ridiculous, but he's so funny.
See that now.
Yeah, he's John Cusack plays an actor, and he's kind of gone off the deep end, so he's at this like rehabilitation center, and Alan Arkin is this long-haired, wears white, says things like life is a cookie, and you're supposed to understand what that means, and he's brilliant. And so when I saw Grosse Point Blank, I was like, oh my God. I was like, now I see what their inspiration was for that scene, because it was ridiculous. But he's definitely, I think Alan Arkin and Joan Cusack were my 2 favorite supporting actors in this movie. I did love Dan Aykroyd. He makes me laugh almost all the time anyway. Hank Azaria is a very brilliant character actor who was also in America's Sweethearts. But yeah, I could just name all the rom-coms they've all shared screen time with, but we won't do that. And I think those are Jeremy Piven was fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about
that's the only guy I could.
Yeah, Jeremy Piven was great. He and John used to be very good friends, and they were in a lot of movies together too. So Jeremy Piven to me is always plays that same kind of character. So I didn't really have anything specific that I remember about him in this movie. I just remember he was in it. So but I love it. I think the supporting characters obviously John Cusack's a star, but the supporting actors really made this movie as good as it was. Because you can have John Cusack and then have a bunch of shitty actors like surrounding him, and it's like, okay, it was a fine movie, but the supporting actors in this movie just made it great.
Yeah. Well, Bob, give us your thoughts on all this.
I mean, you hit all the highlights. It's particularly John Cusack always, especially in this movie. But I mean, she was great. She's great in almost everything that I think she was nominated for Working Girl too.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And all of her dialogue, as far as I know, all the dialogue that she has in Grosse Pointe Blank is ad-libbed.
Really?
She did almost everything on her own. Yeah. And it's hilarious to me. Everything.
Now I need to watch it again.
Yeah.
Just to see that. I didn't know that. It's great.
And this is pretty much the only movie I can think of off the top of my head that I like Jeremy Piven in. Of course, I think it was the first movie I ever saw him in. So, and there are things like that 10 years thing is stuff that my wife and I still do to each other. So
that part is so great.
And what's weird about the Dan Aykroyd character is that everybody else is like playing a comedy straight, which is the whole idea of making good comedy is you play it like it's serious to the people who are in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else does a good job. And then you have Dan Aykroyd off there being like this crazy off the wall, like he's in a different movie almost, he's just elevated a little bit more, but it works because it's Dan Aykroyd. So yeah.
I was going to say that about sort of all of the supporting characters. Everyone sort of outside of Cusack, John Cusack, and Minnie Driver. To me, it kind of reads like they're all in different movies. And I feel like that's sort of playing with the idea of like high school reunions or just the dynamics of high school in general. It's just that you have all of these different crazy personalities that are existing within the same space. And it doesn't really make sense for them to be existing within the same space, except it does. And like Jeremy Piven is in a very different movie, or he's acting in a very different movie than what Dan Aykroyd is doing. And Dan Aykroyd is doing a very different performance than what Alan Arkin is doing. And it's like, but they're all in the same thing. And it, for some reason, it totally blends and works being under the same umbrella. Even, like you said, Joan Cusack ad-libbing all of her lines, like that's totally different from what everyone else is doing. And it all works under the same umbrella of this movie, which is just fantastic. The director Armitage, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Is his first name George?
Yeah. George Armitage.
Yeah. So he's not someone who has a lot of other big name movies under his name that he's directed, but he does a really great job of like keeping everything together and tight and consistent within this movie. It's so like kind of a shame that he doesn't have other great films in his filmography, or if he just like, I guess this was just like the one movie that he directed that he got a shot to direct that like really worked for him and his sensibilities. But it's a shame that he doesn't have more stuff.
Yeah, he's a graduate of the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. So a lot of his early films are like, exploitation films, like Vigilante Force and Hot Rod and stuff like that. I think Miami Blues was the closest he came before Grosse Pointe Blank to hitting the mainstream. But that's one of the reasons why there's a Pulp Fiction standee in the Quickie Mart or whatever and that's because he's friends with he's friends with Quentin Tarantino, and he gave him that stand up to be shot to pieces during that scene.
That's amazing.
An amazing scene.
Michael Kudlitz is in this too, and I remember seeing Band of Brothers, which I probably his breakout role.
Right.
And I saw him in Band of Brothers, and I was like, "That's Bob DiStefano from Grosse Pointe Blank." What the hell is he doing?
Him. I know him from Beverly Hills 90210.
I thought you were going to say Walking Dead for sure, but that's awesome.
Oh no, nope. 90210. He played Tony. I remember him.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's got one of those faces that you've seen him in something, you just can't remember what.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got that face about him. But I did see Band of Brothers, and yeah, I remember that. That miniseries was fantastic. So
Yeah.
So one thing that I have in my notes, and I would be interested to hear if you guys agree or totally disagree with this thought, but I thought that this movie was kind of manic and chaotic in a lot of its construction and pacing and composition and all of that stuff, but like in the best way possible. It was sort of hard to explain like what kind of chaotic feeling I was getting, but I totally loved it. And I was wondering if you guys thought the same of the movie or if you read it as a bit more focused and streamlined.
It's I was reading a interview with George Armitage, and he mentioned that when he got the script, and it was written by Cusack and two of his high school friends, Steve Pink and what was D.V. DeVicentis. I never get that name right, but they'd written like a 140-page script, and Armitage is like, I don't film anything that's longer than 100 pages. So go back and trim it down. So they went back and they wrote for a week, and they came back and it was 150 pages. So,
wow.
So it was like, damn it. So he took the script from them and then trimmed all of what he thought of as the excess down. And I feel like that's what you're getting is, there's very little filler in this movie. It's just hopping from one scene to the next as quickly as possible. And I think that's a result of him going with the Roger Corman school of thing. I only have this much time. I only have this much budget. So I'm just going to cut it down to all of the beats that I want to keep. And then in the interview, he said, of course, we did a lot of they did a lot of ad-libbing and just riffing on things. And he started to notice that a lot of their ad-libbing was actually stuff from the screenplay that he'd cut out. So he's like, oh, it's going to be like this, is it?
That's amazing. That's a hilarious story.
That's funny. Yeah,
but I feel like
I do feel like it was very chaotic, but I also, and I don't usually like look too deeply into things, which I probably should, but I don't. But I always thought it kind of reflected Martin's mindset at the time with the anxiety and the chaos. Because he had such that manic energy, so I kind of felt like the movie's pacing itself was kind of on board with that. But I didn't realize that so much of the movie was ad-lib, so I'm probably wrong. But that's kind of just the thought I got from it being from his point of view, that it just had kind of that same manic energy that his character had, that the whole movie was just kind of, I don't want to say it was all over the place because it blended. It was very well paced. And like Bob said, there's no filler, which I appreciated. So that's kind of the impression that I got from it myself.
I like that.
I love that reading, that it's really aligned with Martin's mindset and sort of where he is. And even though like there's not a lot of filler, so it does seem like it's bouncing around a lot and things just sort of like are sort of happening. And I guess what was cut out was probably just a lot more like character insight and things like that were really like getting us from one scene to another. But you can still feel that all of that stuff exists within, you know, the space between the different scenes, or the, you know, from shot to shot or whatever it is. Like you don't lose that stuff, even though it's not there on screen. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, where you are able to get, you know, Ramona, that reading that you have of it, but you're also not like totally lost and like completely overwhelmed with how manic it is, which is just, you know, it's like they found the perfect balance between the two.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that they made such great use of music to kind of patch over those narrative holes a little bit, because like every movie uses music to kind of convey mood and that sort of thing. But I think this is a movie that actually uses the lyrics more than other films do to try and convey what's going on in either the scene or in people's heads a little bit. So I felt like, and the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is as he's driving into Grosse Pointe for the first time, the song is it Armageddon Time? Is it a Clash song? I think. And the lyrics are along the lines of everything's getting harder to do. And that was kind of the feeling that I got from the character as I was going through. But then you also have, the scene with Robbie, the baby, and you've got Under Pressure getting played in the background. And the lyrics are something along the lines of, we need to learn a deeper way of living life, essentially. I can't remember the words at the moment, but I think they tried to convey some of that stuff through music in a way that's just subtly different from the way you would normally use music.
That's a good point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Another reading that I didn't have, which again, this is why I'm so happy that you two are here to talk about this movie, because you're giving insights that, I'm sure some of our listeners also weren't totally picking up on during their watches and rewatches of this movie. So that's all super awesome. What, besides the sort of deeper meaning of the song choices, what did you guys think of the soundtrack, and specifically just the nostalgia of the songs that they were playing at the high school reunion?
Oh, God.
All the 80s jams.
Bob, you can take this one.
Well, yeah, because of course with me, those were contemporary songs. So they weren't flashback songs or classics at all. But those were all songs that, like, we went out and bought the soundtrack the next day. I still have it sitting in the closet right next to me. It is a great soundtrack, but it is all very much a weird mix of like pop songs and alternative music and like ska, and like Joe Strummer from The Clash actually did the actual musical soundtrack. So there's that kind of, he kind of weaves his music in between, trying to tie things together. I think he does a really great job with it. So, but yeah, they did that. They put out the soundtrack. It did huge. So they put out a second volume of songs from the music that also did great. And they had enough for yet a third soundtrack that they didn't bother putting out. So
why?
Damn.
Yeah.
Come on. I will say, just from my point of view, with watching as many romantic comedies as I have, Let My Love Open the Door is like a rom-com staple. I swear. I'm like, where is this? What is this song that people feel like it has to be in every one of these kind of movies? It's a fine song, but I'm really getting tired of it. In everything that I see, it seems like it's there. It's fine.
Ramona, you bring up an interesting point. As our Screen Age Wasteland resident rom-com expert, how does this movie hold up in the history of rom-coms? Where does it sort of sit? What is it doing that's different from other rom-coms that you've seen, or in line with other rom-coms that you've seen? Just sort of how does it fit into the history of rom-coms?
The thing that I like about it is it's not obviously a conventional romantic comedy. I think you could probably talk to some people who would say that it's not a romantic comedy at all, even though it is. Because the thing that I love about this movie being a rom-com action, whatever you want to call it, is there's this chemistry between John Cusack and Minnie Driver that, like you said, there's no filler, but you can kind of tell that some of these scenes that were cut probably had that history there, the information, more character development, and you still feel it even though you haven't seen the scenes. And I felt that with these two characters, like you could still feel their history, even though you're told about the history, really. Like you don't get a whole lot, but they tell you, he didn't show up on prom night, or he left on prom night, and all this stuff. And just their interactions, to me, I was like, okay, I know that these two people had been in love like 10 years ago and something happened. And once you start getting sucked into that romance between them, you almost forget this is a dark comedy about a hitman. And then once the hitman stuff comes up again, I'm like, wait, what? Like, oh, it's like getting caught up in like this romance of these people coming back together. And then of course, here's a hitman trying to kill him. I'm like, oh, right. And that's what I really love about this movie is it's so many different movies in one movie. And it blends these different genres together so well that this movie is something that like most men aren't going to be like, I love romantic comedies. But if you sit them down and you watch Grosse Pointe Blank with them, they're going to love it without even realizing that it's a romantic comedy. And those are the rom-coms I really love, are the kinds that kind of pull everybody in because it's not just your predictable beat by beat, textbook rom-com. And John Cusack has done quite a few of the beat by beat rom-coms in his career. But this one is it's almost like it's tricking you into thinking it's not a romantic comedy by being like, oh, it's a black comedy action movie. Yeah. It's like, no, this is a black rom comedy. So that's one thing that I absolutely love about this movie is I do love my rom-coms, but I love watching something that makes me forget almost that it's a romantic comedy at times. And then when I'm watching the romantic part of it, it makes me forget I'm watching an action reunion movie. It's just very tricksy in a way. And it kept me on my toes the first time I saw it. And that's what I think it kind of sits into that section of the genre where anybody could watch this movie and love it and not complain about the romantic part of it. Minnie Driver and John Cusack have amazing chemistry. And at the heart of it it's a romance at the heart of it. And I know, it's dealing with Martin's anxiety, what he wants to do with his life, coming back home. And side note, I love that he tells everybody what he does for a living and nobody believes him. Like that's one of my favorite jokes in this movie. Nobody believes him. And then at the end, there's that climactic shootout and the whole time he's telling Debbie how he feels about her while he's trying to get alive. So I think at the heart of it, it's a romance and it's just kind of one of those movies that, you can say it's a romantic comedy or you can say it's not a romantic comedy, but it's still going to be labeled as such because they get their happy ever after, which I think is the textbook. You have to have a happily ever after for it to be labeled a romantic comedy in my head. So I don't know. I just think it's definitely one of the best in the genre. And I think that gets overlooked because people don't necessarily hear Grosse Pointe Blank and think, oh, that's a rom-com. But I think it's great and it's one of my favorites. And I think it's become more, I don't even say it's underrated. Do you guys think this movie's underrated?
What do you think, Bob?
Well, I want there to be a big release with all kinds of extras and a commentary track and all of that. To me, that's the minimum requirement for at least a reassessment. And there really hasn't been yet. I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but Armitage says that they shot 3 versions of every scene. So they did one as written, one that was way more subdued and realistic, and then one that was over the top, which is often the take that got used. But he said there's basically 3 movies that they shot. And I want to see all 3 of those movies.
I feel like that would be like a Blu-ray special edition or something.
Yeah.
Why haven't we received this yet?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I think these different movies would completely change how we view the movie itself. I could easily see one version of this movie and be like, oh yeah, this is not a romantic comedy whatsoever.
Right.
But I didn't know that. That would be amazing to see those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Arrow,
really interesting
if you're listening, get on it.
Yes, please.
Criterion. Let's get on it.
Oh, yeah. This feels like it would be a good Criterion.
I agree.
Yeah. I think that this movie, from my perspective, is sort of underrated or underappreciated. For me, it was totally under my radar. Like this was until I was going through, our list of movies that are in the canon that were eligible for episodes. I thought that someone, misprinted the list and it was supposed to be Point Blank from the 60s that we were talking about. I didn't know that this movie existed. I didn't know that this was a movie that people felt so strongly about. And, I think part of that is going back to what we were talking about earlier in this episode about Generation X sort of being the forgotten generation. And that generation's, again, their sensibilities, their anxieties, their fears, their questions about the world, not really getting the shine that, boomers got, or in more recent movies that are on the list that millennials got and things like that. And now we're sort of moving into like Gen Z is getting some shine in mainstream media and film in terms of like what they are thinking about. And we never fully like dove into Generation X. And I think that this movie, again, it sits on in that same level as The Breakfast Club, as Nevermind by Nirvana, as Fight Club. Like it exists within that same realm about like, this is what Generation X is thinking about. And we should, take these things seriously and examine it in meaningful ways. So again, I'm very happy that this movie is in the canon, and I'm happy that we're getting a chance to talk about it now. So Ramona, you talked to us about sort of where this fits in the world of rom-coms. But I also wanted to ask you guys, and Bob, we'll throw it to you first for this question, is what did you guys think about sort of the explosion of violence that happens within this movie? Because I was expecting more. I was expecting more of like a drastic turn that didn't come, but it is still, it's still pretty wild how this movie does explode into violence. So I was just wondering what you guys made of that aspect of the film.
And this is why I love, one of the reasons why I love the film, because like Ramona was saying, it is so distinctly a romantic comedy. And that whole first part of the actual reunion, the stuff with the baby, the stuff with their little conversation in the balcony, the actual going to the nurse's office, and even his conversation with Boss DeStefano when they don't get into a fight is all playing these playing expectations slightly against what you think the movie's going to be like. And you kind of get, these two people, I always think of that line with frightening personal chemistry. That because they really do have it, and you want them to get together, which is one of the reasons why the ending works when it really shouldn't, but it absolutely does, because you care about these guys. And then when the assassin shows up in the hall and that fight happens, and I think it's one of the more underrated fight scenes in movie history, because they just go balls to the wall for that. And that's Benny the Jet Urquidez, who is a kickboxing champion. And he's also John Cusack's personal trainer.
Oh, okay. Not Benny the Jet from The Sandlot.
No. that is a different movie, my friend.
Were you confused?
That would have been wild. I was like, wait a minute. That kid would have been like 15.
Wow. Now I can't get that out of my head now.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Holy crap. All right. Bring it in. Bring it back in. But that, it just goes nuts. And the violence is so realistic. I mean, they actually really did like put dents in the hall and hit each other. And then you're shocked by the violence. And then Debbie comes running in and stops. And you can kind of feel her world sort of falling apart right in that second. And it only works, one, because of the way they set up the romantic comedy already, and two, because they've made sure that the violence is so explicit at that moment that you're just as shocked in a way as her character is. And the funny thing is, the violence after that never gets as realistic. It's a little more cartoonage. Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, Dan Aykroyd's character gets taken out with a TV to the head. You know,
popcorn. Yeah,
it was very Scream, 1990.
Yeah, it's very silly, very cartoonish. It's not a pen to the throat, which is very off-putting. And that's a great point, Bob, about just how the violence ends up presenting itself.
But it's a tribute to how seriously they're taking the romance. That they give them this moment, and then the moment when Debbie shows up at his hotel room afterwards, where Minnie Driver is just fantastic in that scene.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get
Minnie Driver.
Me.
She's great. She's
so
awesome.
Good. Yeah.
Anything else that you guys want to bring up before we get? I want both of you, before we do recommendations, I want like a final, just a final word to make the case of why this movie is in the canon. Why is it essential, and what's its lasting legacy? But before we get to that, do you guys have any other points or topics that you want to bring up about Grosse Pointe Blank?
Can I just say the one thing that bugged me about this movie? And I do this with a lot of movies. No, it's nothing huge. It's just, this is a 10-year reunion, and none of those people in that gymnasium looked like they were in their 20s. They all, like, I told my husband, I think I put this in my review, this should have been a 20-year reunion because they looked rough. I'm like, how are these people supposed to be 26, 27? There's just no way. Like, maybe Minnie Driver could get away with it, but I didn't buy that.
You know what, though? I always thought that was a comment. There was another comment on the 1980s comedies, because everybody playing teenagers is in their 20s.
Okay. Because you pointed that out, I have pulled back a bit on my thought, because that makes sense. Because the kids in the 80s John Hughes movies, except for maybe Anthony Michael Hall, did look way too old to be teenagers. So I can see how this might have been a little, hey, remember when the 18-year-old was played by a 32-year-old? We're going to go there. So I get it. But initially, when I watched it, I was like, there is no way.
Oh, I totally get that, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody in there is in their 20s at all.
No. But that's it. That was the only thing that bugged me.
No, and if that's the only thing, that's a great movie.
Yeah, it is.
For me, it's a quotable movie, and we didn't really talk about that a lot, but it's one of those movies that my wife and I just use quotes from the movie all the time. If we're going somewhere, my wife will ask me, will there be meetings? Like, of course. No meetings. But even, and so there's a lot of funny quotes.
Yeah.
He repeats the quote, "It's not me," in there a lot, and that's used to emotional effect. But one of the things that I love the most is when he's getting ready to go to the reunion, and he has the kind of phone call with his therapist, and they have to talk through the kind of almost chant like thing. Mm-hmm. This is me. I'm in the now. Yeah. This is me breathing. And then he hangs up and racks the slide on his gun and goes, "This is me breathing." I just love that line. It's such a
very
great
good
line.
Yes.
There's a lot going on there. The one line that I wrote down from this movie is before he goes to the reunion, and it's hard to tell if he's actually practicing what he's going to say to people, or if he's just like making fun of what other people are going to say. And he's going through all the jobs and stuff. And one of the things he says is, "I sell couch insurance," which I thought was the funniest thing ever. I thought it was so funny. I had to rewind to hear it. Because that's obviously something that someone is going to say to you at a high school reunion. Like,
I sell couch insurance.
I'm doing pretty good right now. I sell couch insurance. I am the top couch insurance salesman in the Northeast.
God.
Yep. Oh, and that reminds me of the I killed the president of Paraguay with a fork. How are you doing?
How are you doing?
Yep.
It's so good. It's so good.
So many good quotes. And now that you brought up quotes, I've been going over some of the ones, like looking them up, and I forgot how many good ones there are. I love his conversation with Dr. Oatman, and when he's like, "You didn't tell me what you did for a living," and he just kind of goes around and around. He's like, "I know where you live." It's like, see, now when you say things like that, he's like, "I was kidding." They were so good together.
Yes.
Before we get into the final case for this movie being in the canon, the one other thing that I wanted to mention, and this sort of goes into, I think, the lasting legacy of this movie, but sort of without this, the whole like analyze this and the Sopranos of tough guy who kills people going to see a therapist, that doesn't happen without this movie. It's wild to think that there was like something else that opened up the door for the Sopranos to become what it became.
True.
But like you can draw the line that, you know, without this movie and that relationship that we don't get, you know, I'm sure that was an inspiration for, you know, that entire concept around that show, which I thought was like super cool. And then Analyze This came out in the same year as The Sopranos, which like is also wonderful, but, you know, to a lesser extent lives in like the cultural, you know, shared consciousness the way that The Sopranos does. But I just thought that was an interesting thing to be looking at.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. I do remember Analyze This. Do you remember Analyze That?
I know of it. I haven't seen it.
I haven't either. I just know it exists.
I'm aware of its existence. I do enjoy the first one, you know?
Yeah, it was fine.
Great stuff. So before we get into our recommendations, like I said, make a final case for this movie. Why is it in the canon? What makes it essential? What is its lasting legacy? Ramona, I want to go to you first. Does that work?
Yes. You know, there are very few romantic comedies in the canon, and I understand why. Not all of, I would say probably the majority of rom-coms are not great movies that are essential for watching. So I was very pleased and excited when I saw that Grosse Point Blank would be a part of it, because it's one of those romantic comedies that does kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Subvert the genre in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned earlier when I rambled on about why it's rom-com and where it lands in the genre and the history of rom-coms, it's just not only with the themes of it, you know, we've discussed this so many times, of the anxiety of that generation and the uncertainty of what their future was going to look like. And, you know, especially with Martin having this violent, you know, occupation and then deciding that he wants to be something else, like do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've all been in that position in our lives, not necessarily as hitmen, but doing one thing and then being like, is this what I want to do? Like, this is so unsatisfactory. I'd rather be doing this. And, you know, being somewhere in your life that you don't feel right. And that does produce anxiety. That produces so many emotions that you're trying to go through. And then going back, not that any of us would know, but going back to your 10-year reunion and meeting the people whose lives are very, I guess, mundane in a way, like, and seeing that that's actually kind of what you want as opposed to what you were doing. So I like that this particular movie has, like I said, so many different genres wrapped up into it. You know, it's a black comedy, it's a romantic comedy, it's an action movie. And I guess there are some parts of it you could even say is like a smaller part of it is a drama, but it is essential because I think, especially for people in my generation and Bob's generation, it touches so much on how we're feeling or how we were feeling at that time in our lives. But it also makes it so much fun. It's not a movie that you're going to watch and be like, oh, I relate to this and now I'm depressed. It's fun. It's funny. It's romantic. It's violent, which some people prefer. But in a way that's not so off-putting. You can watch this movie anytime and find humor and entertainment in it and still find you guys pointing out things in this movie that I didn't catch when I watched it. And that's what I like about movies, especially these kind of movies. I can sit down now and watch this movie again, and I'm going to see the stuff that you pointed out to me that I didn't catch before. So I love that it's got the layers. I think it's essential watching for especially people of my generation and Bob's generation to, relate and say, okay, somebody did understand what we were going through and they were able to package it in such a way that, it's not an artsy, nothing against art films, but it's not this artsy, fartsy film that, is going to collect all the Oscars at the end of the year. It's just something that's light and refreshing and it means something. And the themes of it are deeper than it just being a romantic comedy or an action film. And there are very few films like this out there, like very few, believe me. So I think this is definitely one that some people are sleeping on. And I think that they should absolutely watch this movie and appreciate it. My rambling is done.
I love that. That was wonderful. You made
can we just leave it at that? Because that pretty much said it all as far as I'm concerned. That was pretty awesome.
Bob, sorry, you have to make the case.
You have to.
As great as Ramona did capture everything.
You can just copy and paste, right? Yeah, so, for me, Grosse Pointe Blank is an important film in John Cusack's career. It's too bad that John Cusack's career has kind of floundered a little bit. I often compare his career to that of, holy crap, I'm definitely having a Generation X moment. So, he was in Con Air with him.
Nicolas Cage.
So to me, they're very much actors of an age. They have a similar kind of trajectory at first. And then Nicolas Cage also makes really horrible movies occasionally, but he has had a career rebound. And he's always, the thing about Nicolas Cage, and I'm digressing from Grosse Pointe Blank, the thing about Nicolas Cage is that I always feel like he gives 100% to whatever role, no matter how crappy it is. And I feel like John Cusack, if he doesn't believe in the role that he's playing, you can kind of tell.
You can tell. Absolutely.
He's phoning it in on this one.
It's a paycheck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like if he can go back to this period in his life where he was doing writing and producing, because you got movies like Grosse Pointe Blank, you have High Fidelity and Being John Malkovich, although he didn't write that, but these sorts of experimental things that he was more creative and involved in, I think he could have a career renaissance if he went back to this sort of time in his career and focused on those sorts of things. And the movie itself is just, it hit the sweet spot for me and people of my age as far as being a reflection of and a commentary on the time that I was growing up and trying to figure out how to become an adult, and also the time in which I was being vastly disillusioned by the world in which I lived, and having that sort of snarky, dark humor about what are you going to do about a world you have no real chance of influencing. You can only change yourself. And the thing about Martin is that he was a person who is like, I don't like who I have been, is who I want to be enough to win me a new chance. And I think that we all felt, people of my age felt like just wanting to be a better person, we hope is enough to carry us into the next phase of our life. We want to change. We haven't yet started it yet. That was the moment where we all wanted to start being a better us. And that's why the end of Grosse Pointe Blank works for me when, in a more of a dramatic fashion, Debbie should never have anything to do with Martin again.
Correct.
But God, did I love that they ended up driving into the sunset with the violent films playing on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Because that's what I wanted too. So.
Absolutely lovely. You guys both summed it up perfectly. I think after this, there's really no doubt of why Grosse Pointe Blank deserves to be in the canon. If you haven't seen it and you're still listening, please go watch it. If it's been a while since you've seen it, go rewatch it. It totally holds up. It's a lot of fun. This has been a super fun conversation. And before we go, we're going to do everyone's favorite segment. We're going to get into some recommendations. And you guys know the rules. We can go through it quickly for any new listeners that we have out there. We're each going to recommend 3 things that you should check out. If you dig Grosse Pointe Blank, at least one has to be a movie. The other 2 can also be movies, but they can otherwise be books, TV shows, music, anything else, restaurants. We like to get a little weird with it. The connections and ties to the movie can get as weird as you want to. It's a lot of fun. And we try to stay away from recommending things that are also in the canon. But I think we'll be able to get away with not doing that. So yeah, let's get into recommendations. And I guess let's go Ramona, Bob, and then me. And yeah, we'll take it from there.
Well, yell at me if I didn't double check that these are not in the canon. I don't think they are, just based on what they are. But
Okay.
if they are, yell at me. So my first recommendation is a movie, and this is a pretty obvious recommendation, but I'm going to recommend Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina, because not only are they assassins, but it's an action movie. And you could say it's a rom-com. So I think that movie would be a really fun pairing with Grosse Pointe Blank. If you ever wanted a romantic hitman day at home, those 2 movies I think would be really fun to watch back to back.
I love that. That's a great first pick. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Good stuff.
Excellent.
Bob, what do you got?
All right. So my list I have multiple options and randomness. So all right. So bear with me on this. So imagine that Martin has settled down with Debbie. He's left the life. He has a great life. And then for whatever reason, his wife dies. He's totally lost. And then a dog shows up on his doorstep. But then his old life shows back up, and the dog ends up dead, and he goes on a murderous kill spree. To me, John Wick is kind of like a spiritual sequel to this. Much more serious, although there's plenty of comedy in the Wick movies as well. But he dresses like him. He has the same kind of past. So he has a wonderful woman that's brought him out of the life. And yeah, so to me, John Wick is an unofficial sequel to Grosse Pointe Blank.
That's great.
I like that.
I love it. Yes.
Okay. These are amazing picks so far. I love both of those.
I have not seen John Wick. I'm just saying, because I heard the dog gets killed. I can't watch it.
Oh,
yeah.
You have to watch it. Well, maybe you don't.
I know my husband wants me to, because he loves them, but I'm like, the dog dies.
Dog. Yeah.
Well, my wife watched the first one with me, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm done with those."
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an easy way to lose people. Very easy
It
way
is.
to lose.
100%. I will be gone. I will not do it. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Totally fair. No. That's worth mentioning. So I'm going with a theme for my picks, and my theme is going to be, I love the supporting cast and I love a lot of their other works. So I'm picking, different actors from this movie and recommending some of my favorite roles and movies that they appear in. So for my first pick,
nice.
I love Joan Cusack. I think she's absolutely wonderful. And for her, I'm going to recommend School of Rock, which she is absolutely amazing in. She is a legend. So that's my first pick. Yeah.
Fantastic. I like it.
Love that pick. That's such a good movie.
It is.
I feel like School of Rock is an underrated movie. I know it became a Broadway musical, but every time I watch a movie, I'm like, this needs to be.
It's really funny, but then you rewatch it and you're like, oh, this is like a fantastic movie. This is like super well made.
It's so good.
Yeah.
My second pick is also a movie. All three of my picks are movies, but it's not really on theme the way you're doing it. But I did pick another John Cusack film, and I picked America's Sweethearts, not because it has really anything to do with assassins or, hitmen, but a lot of the same cast shows up in America's Sweethearts. Obviously, John Cusack is in this. Ann Cusack has a small role. Hank Azaria and Alan Arkin are all in this film. And Hank Azaria and Alan Arkin are two of the funniest people in the movie. So I would recommend that. It's a romantic comedy with Julia Roberts and Catherine Zeta-Jones. I think it kind of went under the radar when it was released. I don't think it got like I don't think critics loved it that much, but I think it's hilarious. Very quotable. And if you're a fan of John Cusack, especially in his rom-com phase, I would absolutely recommend America's Sweethearts.
Sweet. I've not seen it, so
I feel like I've seen it, but I don't remember much about it. So it's on the list for sure. Coming.
Yes.
I love it. Bob, what's your next pick?
Okay, so this was I had a list that was unofficial sequels. I think I'm gonna drop that and just try and go with sort of a stream of consciousness thing. So this is another movie, another John Cusack movie, and that's really the only relation that they have together. And it's one I know Ramona likes too, and that's 1408.
Yes,
which is a horror movie, Stephen King short story horror movie which is almost entirely just John Cusack dealing with a haunted hotel room. And this is also a really underrated film. I think it's extremely well done. He does an excellent job in it, and well worth watching.
I love that movie so much. Yes.
I haven't seen it. I might have to check it out. I feel like I'm
seen Say Anything either, have you?
Sorry?
Say Anything? You've seen that one?
No, I haven't seen Say Anything. I wanted to watch it before this, or for this recording, but just couldn't find the time.
That's okay.
Disappointment. The disappointment in our voice is just.
I'm sorry.
I think that if you watch Say Anything, your appreciation for Grosse Point Blank will definitely kick it up a few notches.
Yeah.
Just because, as you said, it is its spiritual twin, I guess. But anytime you have time.
Yeah.
It's so good. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just keep
it'll recontextualize this movie. No worries at all.
Is it in the canon? Is Say Anything in the canon?
I don't think it is in the canon.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So many movies that are not in the canon.
Yeah.
That's true. Which
makes
is good.
the movies
otherwise,
in the canon, it loses its the significance. Another movie that's not in the canon, but one that I have seen and one that I love. This is a movie that is really essential to understanding me and my sensibilities as a movie fan. One of those like early favorite movies of mine. Again, I'm going with someone who is great in Grosse Point Blank. Minnie Driver had a year in 1997 because she had Grosse Point Blank and Good Will Hunting. And I love Good Will Hunting. Yeah. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, but I think that movie is great.
Yeah.
And I think she's amazing in it. I think she's so charming, so delightful. A lot of the movie works because of what she does in it. So that's my second pick.
That's a great pick. I forgot they came out around the same time. Was it the same year?
Same year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. I do remember Good Will Hunting very distinctively, but I had in 97, I didn't notice Grosse Point Blank, but Good Will Hunting is a good movie.
Yeah.
So good.
Damn good movie. Yeah.
My last recommendation is it's a little weird, but this was also released in 1997, and you could say that it is a romantic comedy in a way. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but A Life Less Ordinary with Cameron Diaz and Ewan McGregor. about, Ewan McGregor's a janitor who kidnaps Cameron Diaz's character, who's a spoiled rich girl, kidnaps her to get money from her dad. And there's angels who come down to pretend to be bounty hunters because they're trying to see if they can make a love match. It's a very strange movie. Very strange movie, but it's a lot of fun. So I like the whole being on the run from the police and a bunch of angels, and it was a good time.
Very cool. This is a stacked cast as well. Holy cow.
Yes. Yeah. Great cast.
That's
Ramona,
awesome.
we both have movies from 97 that are about janitors.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, very different movies, but yes.
I love it.
Wow.
I love that spiritual connection that our movies have.
Gotta have the janitor.
Got to.
They don't get their stories told as often as they should.
No.
That is true.
Need more janitor movies.
Yes.
Bob, is your last pick going
Oh my
to
God,
be
I so
Happy?
wish. I'm like so desperately searching for janitor
about
movies.
janitor.
1997. Nothing. Damn it. No. Sadly not. Sadly not. This is kind of a, like I said, stream of consciousness sort of thing. So moving on from a Stephen King movie, I'm moving to a Stephen King book. And that book is Billy Summers, which is actually a relatively recent novel. I can't remember if it came out in 2020 or 2021.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it not last year? No, last year was Fairy Tale. You're right. I think it was 2021.
Yeah, and it features a hitman who has a somewhat of a conscience. He only kills evil people. And having to deal with a hit that goes wrong and a woman that he basically saves from attackers and the difficulty that arrives from all that. It's a pretty decent, it's probably a middle of the road Stephen King story. It's not that great. It's still eminently readable, but it's the connection to Hitman and 1408 being a Cusack. So it's me reaching, really, is what it is.
I feel like Stephen King's novels, though, even like his, not great novels, are still worth reading, to be honest with you. So yeah, I enjoyed Billy Summers. Yeah,
nice. That's a great. I like that last pick, and I like the connection to 1408 as well. I dig that. So for my last recommendation, sticking with the theme of folks who are great in Grosse Pointe Blank and also great in other movies. For my last pick, I'm going to go with Hank Azaria, who I love. And I'm going to go with another movie that I am sad to know that it's not in the canon. But I would make an argument for it actually being in the canon. Maybe if we ever do like a canon 2.0, Good Will Hunting, and this movie will make it in. But my pick for Hank Azaria is 1995 Michael Mann, Heat. And Hank Azaria's expression when Al Pacino drops the line, "She's got a great ass," and then it cuts to Hank Azaria's reaction. That is one of the best reaction shots in the history of movies. So I got to give him a shout out for that.
Heat is not in the canon?
No, it's not.
That is kind of surprising, to be honest with you. I'm surprised that it's not in the canon.
Yeah.
That's
there was a minor part of me as you were leading up to it. Is it going to be Godzilla 98? Is it going to be Godzilla 98?
I've actually already
in the canon. I was like, oh yeah, no, never.
I've already recommended Godzilla 98.
That's true.
You did.
That's true.
I think
was that from Jurassic Park?
I think it was our Jurassic Park episode.
Yes.
I should just make it a theme where I always recommend Godzilla 1998 because I was thinking about doing it for our Godzilla episode too.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
That would be a silly little bit for us to do. All right, before we say our final goodbyes, let's run through our recommendation list one more time, and we'll go same order, 1, 2, 3, list them off.
My first recommendation was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. My second recommendation was America's Sweethearts. And my third recommendation is A Life Less Ordinary.
My first recommendation was John Wick. My second recommendation was 1408. And my last recommendation is the novel Billy Summers.
Wonderful. My first recommendation is School of Rock. My second recommendation is Good Will Hunting. And my last recommendation is Heat. There you have it. Grosse Point Blank. It's in the canon. We love it. We're here to support it. Ramona, Bob, thank you guys so much for a really lovely, insightful conversation about this movie that I didn't know too much about, but now I adore and have a lot of admiration for. So thank you guys again. Anything to say? Any goodbyes or anything that you want to mention to folks before we wrap this one up?
None here. I had a great time, though. Now I really want to go rewatch this movie. So I think I might be doing that this week.
That's awesome.
I love it.
I enjoyed talking about this movie. I don't think I get to talk about it enough. So this is a completely minor thing, but I was on another podcast to talk about Grosse Point Blank a couple of years ago. And it's called So Gross, Such Point, Much Blank.
That's crazy.
And,
I love that.
Yeah. And it's on the Film Inquiry website. So
nice.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think this was better. Don't tell them I said that.
we won't tell them. But yeah, listener, if you're looking for more Grosse Point Blank content out there, and specifically Grosse Point Blank content that features Bob, you can check out that podcast. You can also check out his review on Screen Age Wasteland. You can also check out Ramona's review of Grosse Point Blank on Screen Age Wasteland. You can also check out all of the other articles and fun threads and lists and questions and quizzes, all that good stuff that we have over there. A ton of great stuff, a ton of great movie conversations with great people. We'll see you there, and we will see you next week back in the canon. Take care, everyone.